Prospects for South Africa's economic growth and the outlook for 2015 is likely to come under more constraint due to unemployment, load shedding, looming retrenchments and industrial action. The last round of wage talks between government and public sector trade unions resumes today, with the prospect for a strike looming in the public sector. A wage increase of between 7 and 8% for civil servants this year will add between 42 and 60 billion rands to the already struggling fiscus. Free Market Foundation Labour Economist Loane Sharp is in studio today to analyse the situation for us. Loane, thank you so much for coming through today.
Thank you. Can
we just start with where we currently are at? Unions have already said there have been 2 offers from government. They've rejected those 2 offers. Today we're about to hear on the 7% being accepted. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, for a long time, the settlement reached between the government and the unions, public sector unions, has been trivial. Unions have worked out that by regrading jobs, promoting people to management, they can basically get the increases that they want. So whether the Minister of Finance agrees to 5 or 6 or 7% is not important, because there are other extra budgetary mechanisms that the unions can use to escalate wages. But we are in crisis. 88% of government final spending at the moment is consumed by compensation of employees. That leaves only 12% for the payment of interest, the building of infrastructure, etc. So the public sector workforce is in chaos. It's grown from 1.1 million in 1994 to 3 million today. This is totally unsustainable. The taxpayer cannot afford these extremely generous wages and working conditions. Housing allowances, medical aid allowances, generous pension fund allowances. But I think the public sector unions are going to dwindle in time. At the moment, unionization has declined to such an extent in the private sector that only 1 in 4 workers is unionized. If you exclude the public service, only 1 in 8 workers is unionized. So really the only part of the economy where workers are unionized is in the public sector on any significant scale. So there are now more union members in the civil service than the entire private sector workforce put together. And this is obviously unsustainable. But, you know, whether we have 5, 6 or 7% is irrelevant. 20 years of above inflation increases, consistent also with the lowest productivity levels in 46 years, are totally unsustainable.
There are talks of a looming strike. I think this is if unions again today are unhappy. South Africa cannot afford to see what we saw last year with AMCU, that massive strike. So if that is on the cards, what will be happening?
Well, you know, we talk about the wage increase of 7%, adding 42 to 60 billion rand to the public sector payroll. That's the least of our concerns. What does it do to the private sector where that money comes from? For the 60 billion that it will add to the fiscus, these increases, it'll remove about 190 billion rand of investments that were planned by private businesses over the next year. So it's too simplistic to say that it's going to cost the economy 60 billion. It's also going to cost the economy what we lost in investment spending that would have occurred if we didn't have these generous wage increases. I think government has been captured by the public sector unions. We're seeing cadre deployment, we're seeing corruption that is now endemic. For example, in education, 486,000 teachers refuse to have their performance evaluated. They refuse to have inspectors in classrooms. They refuse to allow learner performance in the classroom to be a measure of their own performance as teachers. This is just in education. In healthcare, in policing, in every one of these areas, we've got serious chaos. Just in private security, we've got 900,000 private security guards on the beat. Compare that to 500,000 policemen and women.
Yes.
The private sector is developing alternatives to a public sector that is in an advanced state of collapse.
What is then the intervention for government for the public sector?
Well, it's a contract between South Africans specified in the Constitution that economic redress is required for historical impunity. But there are many better ways than just packing people into the public service. I wouldn't even call that transformation, I'd call that enrichment. For example, why don't we give away shares in SAA, the Airports Company, Eskom, Transnet? Why don't we give these shares away to disadvantaged people who could sell those shares, start a small business, put a deposit down on a house or on a car, educate their children? That would be real transformation. I think using the public sector workforce for a transformation, or let's call it an enrichment agenda, has been disastrous for the provision of those services. So privatization is the best way to put probably 120 to 125,000 Rand into the hands of every South African to do with as they please.
Well, that's definitely something I think we should be considering. I thank you very much for joining us today. That's Loane Sharp, just analysing the situation for us today as government expects to hear if unions have accepted their 7% wage offer.